let's take questions.
Happy to take any questions. Of course, we released our committee substitutes for the House Budget Committee today. Chief amongst those things that we changed from the governor's budget was a $100 million plan to invest general revenue into the infrastructure project that would repair the state's bridges or some of the state's bridges. And so happy to answer any questions that you might have about that.
You talked about possibly continuing this appropriation over budgets over the next few years, assuming that you remain budget chairman. You're in a good position to make sure that happens.
Yes, absolutely. It would be my intention to continue to do this for up to 4 years, if it takes that long, to make a similar impact as compared to the governor's bonding proposal. My intention is to try to address the same concerns with bridges that he has kind of shown a spotlight on, but do that within the confines of our budget as it exists now, rather than going into debt or increasing taxes.
Is this, to your knowledge, the first time general revenue would be used to fund roads and bridges?
It is certainly the first time in recent history, but I would suspect that some time ago that general revenue was, before there were many dedicated funds, general revenue would have been used to expend on roads and bridges. But I have to go back and check the history books on that. So.
Now, you spoke today in the committee hearing when you announced this plan about transportation being what you saw as a chief function of government to support transportation infrastructure. If this is a first using GR in that way, do you think it's time for that kind of wholesale, fundamental change in how we do things in Missouri?
I do think it is. I think that the budget is a reflection of the state's priorities, and amongst those priorities should first be the core functions of government, and I certainly put transportation infrastructure amongst the core functions of government. So yes, I think that our budget should reflect those priorities, and high on that list would be transportation infrastructure. So yes, to answer your question, I do think it is appropriate to find these solutions inside of the state budget as it exists today.
We spoke to Representative Kendrick about your proposal, the ranking Democrat on the committee. The chief concern he seemed to have was saying that taking this funding from GR would, if not in this year, in future years, pit transportation against other priorities like education, things like that. What's your response to that? Well,
I think that's the role of the General Assembly to determine how those various priorities are balanced. Transportation, education, public safety, those are all big priorities in Missouri. Beyond that, we have our Medicaid program. That's what we are doing here, is we're vetting out these issues. We're trying to assign a list of priorities that or an order of those priorities that we address first, and then some downstream of those priorities. So to acknowledge his concern, or to I guess my rebuttal would be that is exactly what we're doing here. We are talking about how we prioritize transportation versus education versus public safety. That is the process that the General Assembly goes through, and I think that's a natural and appropriate process.
Forgive me, Mr. Chairman, I was in a different committee, so I didn't hear the comments, but just to clarify, you're opposed to the governor's $350 million plan? Is that accurate?
I'm concerned about taking on additional debt. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars in debt service every year when we have that opportunity to make a similar impact on the bridges that have been identified as in need of repair over the course of 4 years, and thereby save the state $100 million over 15 years, I think we ought to try to take that opportunity. So I'll just say that this idea originated from my desire to not put the state further into debt, and knowing full well that the people in Missouri don't want to raise taxes. That kind of takes us back to working within the confines of the budget as it exists today.
And do you have a sense about $100 million, how many bridges that you guys could fix or repair with that amount of funding?
I think there's a rolling work order that we work on, so it's hard to say that on any given day we can get X number of bridges for X price. But the number that we've talked about has been more in context of the bonding proposal, so it would be hard to say how to break that out year by year.
And final question from me, have you spoken to the governor about it? Have you talked to him to let him know about your concerns?
I certainly have, and we discussed this and had a conversation about it, and I left that meeting with an impression that we are going to work together to find a solution for this. And I want to be clear, it's because he's drawn attention to this matter and led the way on the issue That's why we're having this conversation. So I give him credit for that, and this has been a priority of his from day one, and we've talked a lot about it, and that's why we find ourselves here today talking about how we go to pay for our need with infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure.
With stretching it out, the bridges out over 4 years, is there any concern it'll end up costing more to fix the bridges if you leave it for a longer time than doing it all immediately?
That's not a great concern as compared to that $100 million savings that we obtain over over 15 years. I think the debt service, it certainly wouldn't cost that much more to extend the projects over 4 years rather than do them. And I think it also should be said that if we had all the money we needed to fix our transportation infrastructure concerns today, we couldn't fix them all right away. We couldn't probably do it inside of a year. So we'd have to stagger that anyway. So I would suspect that the cost would not be great to spanning this over 4 years as opposed to getting that money up front.
What do you,
Go ahead.
what do you say to those that say this is a short-term solution to a long-term problem?
Well, I would disagree that I think by showing that this is possible and that this is something that the legislature can prioritize in this way, it is something that we will discuss on an annual basis going forward. And as long as there's a will, that's kind of the beauty of this process. If there's a will of the legislature to prioritize transportation infrastructure, then we can do that. And if we have other needs that change over time, then we can adapt or be flexible to those needs. So as long as we have roads and bridges that are in need of repair, this is going to be an issue that's going to be at the forefront of what the legislature appropriates for. So.
One more question.
Is part of the reason you put this plan forward indicative that in the broader discussion of transportation funding, you don't think going back to the voters is an option based on what happened in November?
That's right. Yeah, I think it's clear. The voters have sent a message the last couple times. We've talked about raising the gas tax, that they don't want to do that, and I agree. And so I don't want to go back to the voters and ask for more tax revenue. And I think they've sent the message loud and clear that we need to live within our means, so to speak, and that's what I intend to do.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome.